My name is Daniel, and for as long as I can remember, my unofficial job title in the family has been fixer. If a cabinet squeaked, I found the oil. If a bill ran late, I found extra hours. If the Wi-Fi blinked, I crawled behind the couch with a flashlight and patience. I wasn't the star of the show. I was the crew who made sure the set didn't collapse. My younger sister, Clara, was the star. She has a way of entering a room as if the air itself is brighter for seeing her. My parents, Robert and Elena, always called it potential. If Clara wanted to try a new activity, they framed it as investing in her future. When I asked what that meant, Dad smiled and said, "You're practical, son. You wouldn't get it." Practical became a gentle word for invisible. It didn't start with big scenes. It started with consistent, small tilts. When we were kids, if we both came home with good grades, Clara got a new jacket and I got a "nice work, keep it up." When something broke, I learned to repair it. When money felt tight, I picked up a weekend shift. At 16, I bagged groceries to save for a used car. When I finally had $2,000, Dad asked to borrow half for a month. I never saw it again. 2 months later, Clara turned 16 and posed next to a shiny hand-me-down Civic, balloons tied to the mirrors. "Safe and reliable," Dad said, ruffling her hair. "Nothing's too much for my girl." I learned bus routes. College didn't change the roles, it clarified them. I went into IT, not glamorous, but steady. I learned how to make networks behave, how to keep servers calm. After graduation, I rented a small apartment with creaky floors and excellent light. I built a life around predictable hours and quiet dinners. Then one evening, Dad called with that upbeat tone I recognize from every big ask. "Family mortgage is crushing us," he said. "Rates are wild. If you co-sign, it'll boost your credit. Win-win." Mom chimed in, soft and persuasive, "It's just paperwork, sweetheart. You're helping us keep the house." I wanted to believe that helping would feel like belonging. I signed. Payments came, and my name sat there on the line each month, tight as a knot. When I checked in, Dad said, "Relax, it's handled." When I asked for clarity, he said I worried too much. Meanwhile Clara explored. Photography needed a $1,200 camera. Music required a $600 keyboard. Fashion meant a $900 sewing machine. When the credit card felt heavy, I was the quiet solution. Each time I hesitated, the script queued up, "Don't be selfish," Dad would say. "You don't understand, she's the baby," Mom added. "You're just jealous," Clara would toss, not cruelly. I learned to see my role, not as if naming a fact about the weather. The smaller humiliations stung most. I'd bring groceries to stock their fridge, and at dinner Dad would raise his glass, "Good man, Daniel knows how to contribute." Minutes later he'd slide the last slice of pie to Clara. "You've had enough, son." When I upgraded my phone after a year of saving, Mom frowned, "That's showy." 2 weeks later she handed Clara a new tablet, for school. If I had something, I was indulgent. If Clara had something, she was blossoming. There were warm moments too, laughter around a birthday cake, a familiar sitcom rerun humming in the background while we folded laundry. I don't want to pretend there was no love. But love sat beside a ledger, and every time the page turned, I was the margin note that balanced the sum. The breaking point was quiet when it arrived. It wasn't a holiday or a crisis, just a Sunday. I had taken a cheap weekend trip with friends to a lakeside cabin that smelled like pine cleaner and damp towels. No service, no screens, that was the point. On the drive home, my phone lit up with memes from our group chat. Nothing from the family, normal. I stopped by my parents' place to grab my MacBook. I'd left it on my old desk before the trip. The TV was a little too loud in the living room. The house smelled like baked chicken and artificial lemon. Dad was in the garage leaning over the workbench with a rag in his hand like a mechanic in a commercial. Mom stood at the sink, rings off, hands in soapy water, humming along to the radio. "Hey," I said, letting the screen door sigh behind me. "I'm grabbing my laptop from my room." "Hi, honey," Mom answered without turning. "In your room?" "Yeah." Down the hallway, my old desk gleamed, oddly bare. No charger coil, no sticky notes, no small dent where the cable always rested. Just clean wood. That little elevator drop sensation hit my stomach. I stepped back into the kitchen. Where's my MacBook? Dad came in from the garage, still wiping a clean rag. Funny you should ask, he said with a practiced half-smile. I sold it. I waited for the laugh that would tell me he was teasing. It didn't come. I let out a quick, dry chuckle anyway. What? He leaned on the counter. You leave things here, it teaches bad habits. You've got a work computer. It's not that deep. I blinked. That's my property. There are personal files on it. Mom finally turned, voice patient the way one speaks to a child on the verge of a tantrum. You left it, sweetheart. If you really needed it, you would have taken it with you. Actions have consequences. Tires crunched outside. A quick horn chirp. Clara's cheerful ding-ding from a small bell. She rolled into the driveway on a brand-new Ebike, white frame sparkling, thick tires, a battery pack shining like a gemstone fixed to the down tube. She took off her helmet with a hair flip and called, "Thanks again, Dad." Dad's chest rose, proud. "Looking good, kiddo." "How much was that?" I heard myself ask. 2,300, Clara said brightly. "But it's an investment, my commute, sustainability. You should try being spontaneous sometimes." Mom laughed. Dad clapped her shoulder, "Anything for my girl." I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I placed my palms on the counter and felt the tacky ring from an unwiped glass. My name was on a mortgage here. My laptop wasn't. Dad tossed me the rag. "Don't make it a thing, Daniel. Be useful and set the table." We sat for dinner. The routine unfolded. Dad served himself first, then Clara, then Mom. When the dish reached me, a wing and a scoop of soft potatoes remained. I wasn't hungry anyway. My appetite lived somewhere else, in a place where my work and my privacy had not been pawned for someone else's ride. Halfway through, Dad cleared his throat the way he does when he's about to announce terms. "So, Clara's looking at an apartment near downtown." Mom clapped softly. "Isn't that exciting?" Clara shrugged, smile tucked at the corner of her mouth. "Rent's high, but I'll figure it out." Dad looked at me. "Your sister's young. She shouldn't have to drown in bills. You can help cover her rent until she's settled." My fork paused. "Excuse me." Mom's tone turned gentle, businesslike. "You're stable, honey. You live alone. You don't have the same expenses. It's only fair." "Fair?" I asked quietly. "You sold my laptop last week." Dad waved it away. "You're still on that? It was just a computer. She's starting her life." I set my fork down. It wasn't just a computer. And I'm not paying her rent. Silence pressed on the room. Clara's eyes lifted from her phone. "Wow. Don't be so dramatic. It's nothing to you." "It's not nothing," I said. My voice surprised me, steady, measured. "I'm not your budget solution. I'm not covering rent, gadgets, hobbies, or bikes. I'm not an ATM with a seat at this table." Dad's recliner creaked as he leaned forward, voice low. "Watch your tone. You don't talk to your mother or your sister like that." "I'm not," I answered. "I'm telling you I'm done." Mom shook her head, disappointment darkening her eyes. "You've always been so cold, Daniel. Family helps family." "Tell them the truth," I said calmly. "What are we supposed to tell people if you won't step up for your own sister? Tell them my name is tied to your mortgage. Tell them you sold my property without asking. Tell them every time Clara wants something, the cost gets redirected to me." Clara flushed. "You're just jealous. Dad helped you too, remember your braces?" I let out a short breath of a laugh. "The ones I finished paying myself at 16 because Dad forgot the last 3 payments." Something within me shifted, not a thunderclap, not a slammed door, just a quiet click, like a lock deciding to set. I looked at each of them, and for once I didn't scan for approval, or craft the sentence least likely to cause a scene. I said the simplest thing, the thing I had never given myself permission to say. No. Dad's hand tapped the table, silverware jumped. Mom's mouth opened, then closed. Clara rolled her eyes and muttered, pathetic, but it sounded more rehearsed than confident. I stood, slid my chair back without scraping the tile, and reached for my keys. Mom's voice sharpened. If you walk out that door, don't bother coming back. Don't expect family when you're old and alone. I met her eyes. I'd rather be alone than drained. I walked to the door. Behind me, I heard Dad say something about gratitude and roofs. I heard Clara's bell outside, 2 cheerful notes swallowed by evening. I stepped onto the porch. The air felt cooler than it had a minute ago. Quieter. I closed the door gently and stood for a second, my hand on the lock, noticing how still the world can be when a humming machine finally powers down. I didn't run. I didn't look back through the window to see if they were watching. I walked to my car, slid in, and sat with my hands on the wheel. My phone buzzed once. I let it buzz. The engine turned over. The streetlights blinked their slow pulse along the road home. As I pulled away, the house receded in the mirror, a small square of light that belonged to someone else. People say the moment you set a boundary is the moment you lose people. Maybe. But sometimes, the first thing you lose is a weight you didn't realize you'd been carrying. As the tires hummed, I could feel that weight lift, not all at once, but in increments. A corner here. A strap there. Enough to breathe differently. I drove toward my quiet apartment, with creaky floors and excellent light, and decided that this time, I wouldn't explain, apologize, or negotiate. I would rest. And then, in the morning, I would begin the work of keeping intact. When I got back to my apartment that night, I sat on the edge of my bed with the keys still in my hand. My phone lit up again, 2 missed calls from Mom, 1 from Dad, a text from Clara, "Wow, you really ruined dinner. Congrats." I stared at the screen until it dimmed. I didn't answer. For the first time, ignoring them felt like an act of survival instead of rebellion. By morning, my voicemail was full. Mom's voice was soft and wet with tears. "Daniel, sweetheart, please, you don't mean this. We're family. You don't turn your back on family. Please don't do this to us." Then Dad's, sharp and brittle, "You think you can walk away after all we've done for you? Ungrateful. Selfish. Don't forget whose roof you grew up under." Clara's, of course, was short and biting, "Whatever. You've always been jealous. Enjoy your sad little life." I sat with my coffee, listening to their voices, and realized something: none of them said we're sorry. Not once. It was all about obligation, guilt, and appearances. They didn't miss me. They missed what I gave them. The calls didn't stop. By the 3rd day, the tone had changed. Mom sent a text, "Mortgage is due Friday. Your father is stressed. Please don't let us down." I laughed bitterly into my mug. Don't let us down. For years, I had carried their us like it was mine. This time, I left the message unanswered. Dad escalated within hours. 10 missed calls in a row, 1 voicemail where he practically shouted into the phone, "Fine. You want to play tough guy? You're on this loan too, Daniel. They'll come after you as well. Don't think you're safe." I blocked his number. The silence that followed was strange, like the sudden absence of static after years of background noise. Clara, of course, moved her battle to Instagram. A photo of her new white frame Ebike, a caption that read, "Learning to do life without people who hold you back." Her friends filled the comments with heart emojis, clapping hands, encouragement. It should have stung. Instead, it felt like confirmation that I had done the right thing. If her version of life was built on draining me dry, then being erased from her feed was a blessing. For weeks, I fought the habit of reaching for my phone at night, waiting for another demand disguised as love. There were none. Just quiet. I had forgotten what quiet sounded like. But the mortgage wasn't a ghost I could simply ignore. My name was still tethered to it, an anchor dragging behind me. So I spent nights researching, calling banks, asking questions I never thought I'd have to ask. How do I legally remove myself from a mortgage? What's the process? What are my rights? It wasn't easy. The paperwork was thick, the steps exhausting, but it was possible. I scheduled the appointment, printed the forms, and rehearsed the conversation in my head. 2 weeks later, I drove back to their house, the papers in my hand. My chest felt tight the entire drive, but also strangely steady. I wasn't going to ask this time. I was going to end it. Dad opened the door, his eyes narrow, his jaw set. "What do you want?" I held out the folder. "I'm taking my name off the mortgage." He scoffed. "Coward." Mom appeared behind him, cheeks red from crying. "Please, Daniel. Don't do this. Think of your sister." I shook my head. "I am. That's why I'm done." For 10 minutes, they refused. They argued, guilted, begged, accused. I didn't flinch. Finally, Dad realized the signatures weren't optional, they were inevitable. He signed with a scrawl so sharp the pen nearly tore the paper. Mom resisted longer, her tears falling onto the forms, but in the end she signed too. Clara wasn't home. Maybe that was best. When it was finished, I placed the pen down and said quietly, "You'll figure it out without me." Then I walked away. That night, for the first time in years, my phone didn't ring. The silence stretched into days, then weeks. At first it felt wrong, like a missing tooth you can't stop probing with your tongue. But then I noticed something else. I was sleeping better. My appetite returned. My shoulders weren't always hunched from bracing for the next request. On Sunday nights, instead of dragging a pie into their kitchen and waiting for scraps, I cooked for myself. Pasta with garlic butter. A roasted chicken. Meals that were mine, seasoned the way I liked them, served on plates I had chosen. It felt small and revolutionary at once. At work, my manager noticed. "You seem lighter lately," she said after a meeting. And she was right. For the first time, I wasn't stumbling and half-drained from late-night family emergencies. I had energy. I volunteered for projects. I stayed after to help a coworker. People saw me, not as a background character, but as Daniel. I started saying yes to things I would have once declined. A coworker invited me on a weekend hiking trip. I went. A neighbor asked if I wanted to join a pickup basketball game. I laced up my sneakers and said, "Sure." I even joined a small local book club, and when I introduced myself, I didn't have to explain my family or my obligations. I was just Daniel, someone who liked stories. Even my apartment changed. Before, it had been a crash pad between responsibilities. Now it became home. I hung shelves. I bought prints of city skylines and mountain ranges. I framed them and set them on the walls. I bought a sturdy desk and set my work laptop there. Every corner of the space became something I had chosen, not something handed to me or demanded from me. And the best part? I didn't feel guilty for loving it. Sometimes I still see Clara's posts. Photos of her bike, of brunches, of nights out. Captions about freedom, adventure, self-discovery. It's funny, and a little sad. She still plays the golden role, but without me in the background to fund the stage. I don't comment. I don't react. Her world spins, mine spins, and they no longer overlap. Mom tried once more, one email with the subject line, "We still love you." Inside, it was the same script, obligations, guilt, appearances. I didn't answer. Love isn't love when it's only spoken in the currency of sacrifice. It's not perfect. There are days when the silence echoes too loud. Days when I wonder if I'll regret walking away. But then I remember that the silence is honest. Their noise was not. Every paycheck I deposit, every dinner I cook, every mile I walk in peace reminds me, I am not their wallet. I am not their scapegoat. I am not the safety net stretched until it frays. I am simply myself. And for the first time, that is enough. Months passed after that night. I walked away with the mortgage papers signed. In the beginning, the silence felt like standing in a wide field with no sound except the wind, strange, almost frightening, but freeing. Slowly, it became my normal. I woke up without dread, without the buzzing of my phone filled with demands disguised as requests. My morning started with the smell of coffee and the sound of birds outside my window instead of my father's voice calling me selfish. I began to build routines that were mine alone. Sunday dinners became my own quiet ritual, a new recipe, a candle lit on the table, music humming softly in the background. Sometimes it was simple pasta, other times I'd attempt a dish far beyond my skill level just for fun. Each meal was a reminder, I wasn't feeding obligation anymore. I was feeding myself. The money I once funneled into family debt stayed in my account. At first, I almost felt guilty watching my savings grow. I had been trained to believe that every extra dollar belonged to someone else. But slowly, the guilt faded, replaced by pride. I upgraded my worn-out phone, not because someone else needed it, but because I wanted it. I bought running shoes and actually used them, jogging in the evenings along quiet streets, breathing deeply without the weight of resentment on my chest. Work felt different too. My manager pulled me aside one day and said, "You're stepping up in ways I hadn't seen before. I think you're ready for more responsibility." A month later, I was promoted. The raise wasn't enormous, but it was enough to feel like validation, that focusing on myself wasn't selfish. It was strength. Outside of work, I let myself say yes to things I once denied. A coworker invited me to a trivia night at a pub. I went, laughed harder than I had in years, and even made a few friends. I joined that local book club and found myself sharing thoughts about stories instead of hiding in the background. For the first time, people knew me not as the dependable fixer, but as Daniel, a man with opinions, humor, and dreams. Sometimes, of course, the past tried to crawl back in. One evening, Clara messaged me out of nowhere. The text was short, "Rent's tough. Can you help just this month?" My fingers hovered over the keyboard. For years, that kind of message would have pulled me back in. But I had already written my answer months ago when I walked out of that house. I deleted the message and blocked her number. I felt no guilt. It wasn't cruelty, it was survival. Mom tried too. A birthday card came in the mail with a long letter inside, filled with words like, "We miss you," and "Family helps family." But between the lines were the same expectations: "Clara is still struggling. It would mean the world if you could support her the way you always have." I folded the letter back into the envelope and placed it in a drawer. I didn't reply. Instead, I focused on the life I was building. I decorated my apartment with art prints of skylines, sunsets, and landscapes that reminded me of the places I wanted to see. I started saving with a new goal in mind, not for someone else's rent or hobbies, but for my own future. Travel. A house. Maybe one day a family of my own, raised on fairness and love instead of obligation. The true turning point came one Saturday morning. I was jogging in the park when I spotted a group playing basketball. One of the guys waved me over. I hesitated, old habits die hard, but then I stepped onto the court. I played terribly at first, tripping over my own feet, missing shots, laughing at myself. But they laughed with me, not at me. By the end, sweaty and breathless, I realized something: this was the kind of connection I had always wanted. People who saw me as equal, not as a resource. Later, over water bottles and jokes, one of them asked casually, "So, what's your family like?" I paused. For a moment, I thought of all the years of carrying, of the laptop sold, of the mortgage, of Clara's bike, of dinners where I went hungry while she was served first. But then I thought of now, of silence that felt like peace, of savings that grew, of meals I cooked for myself, of laughter with new friends. My family? I said finally. Complicated. But I'm learning that doesn't define me anymore. They nodded, and the conversation moved on. Simple, light, no weight attached. That night, I sat in my apartment, a soft lamp glowing over the desk where my new laptop rested. Not one borrowed from work, not one stolen out from under me. One I bought with my own money. My own choice. I opened a blank document and typed a single line at the top: "This is not about revenge. This is about closure." Because it was. I didn't hate my parents. I didn't even hate Clara. They had their patterns, their roles, their favoritism. But I no longer belonged to that system. I had stepped out, closed the door, and let it be. Some people say closure comes from an apology. I disagree. Closure came when I stopped waiting for one. Will I ever be in their holiday photos again? Maybe not. Will my phone ever buzz with mom's guilt-laden texts or dad's orders again? Maybe. But I've learned how to silence it, not just with a block button, but with boundaries. I am no longer the family wallet. No longer the invisible scaffolding holding up someone else's stage. I am Daniel. I cook my meals. I run in the park. I laugh with friends. I build a future with my own hands. And for the first time in my life, that is enough.